All right, it is my pleasure to introduce two amazing individuals up to the stage. One is Jacki Zehner, and the second is Jesse Draper. Please give them a warm round of applause. As they make their way up, I'm going to make a quick introduction. We are first going to talk about Jessie Draper. Jessie is the general partner of Halogen Ventures. She's a fierce advocate for investing in women and the opportunity for using technology. She's a mother of 3 boys and founding partner of Halogen Ventures. Halogen Ventures is a Los Angeles based venture capital firm focused on early stage investing in consumer technology and strategic B2B software companies with a female in the founding team. Jessie is the first solo female GP in Los Angeles and is also a fourth-generation venture capitalist, the creator and host of Emmy-nominated television series The Valley Girl Show, and host of the Monumental podcast. She's a fierce advocate for investing in women and the opportunity for using technology and innovation to solve some of the biggest issues facing women and families today. Among her 70-plus portfolio companies are The Skim, Babylist, Third Love, Hop Skip Drive, The Flex Company, Squad, which was acquired by Twitter, and Eloquy, which was sold to Walmart, and This Is Elle, sold to Procter & Gamble. Selected as one of the top 10 early-stage female investors by Business Insider, Jessie was also listed by Marie Claire magazine as one of the 50 most connected women in America. Nominated by the NRF as a Deal Make Hers, Variety's Holly's New Leaders, and Refinery 29's 30 Rising Stars. Jessie has been a contributor to CNBC and CNN. Following Jessie's viral Medium post, investing in women isn't a fucking charity. She's becoming a leading voice of women and technology. Did I say it wrong?
No.
Oh,
I think
okay.
you just said it, should have said it louder. Investing in women is not charity.
There you have it, folks.
Just saying.
Also, the way I tracked Jessie down was by the hashtag Invest in Women. And that's something that I found out here in Utah, and I totally admire because that is exactly what we're doing here. So, Jessie, thank you so much for coming out to LA. Now, I have the pleasure of introducing my friend, but I'm going to be official instead of giving you all the dirty details. Jacki Zehner. She is the CEO and founder of She Place and She Money. She describes herself as a financial feminist. I hope you saw the thongs downstairs. They're amazing.
Yesterday.
Yes. She is the latest global she is the latest global gender gap report states that the current rate of change, it will take over 135 years to reach gender parity. That's not good. And for Jacki, that's completely unacceptable. As the founder of She Place, her plan is to bring all of her decades of experience championing for the advancement of women and girls under one umbrella. Jacki learned quite a lot about finance while working at Goldman Sachs. Well, at the age of 32, because right now she's about 36, she became the youngest woman and first female trader to make partner. After leaving Goldman in 2002, Jacki almost spent a decade absorbing as much as she could about the wealth management industry before diving into philanthropy full service, serving on many women-focused nonprofit boards, giving through her family foundation, and co-founding a global philanthropic network called Women Moving Millions, through which members have collectively given over $1 billion with a gender lens. While Jacki has always been an investor, she's committed to being more intentional in her efforts to champion the field of gender lens vesting, and as well as doing, she can help women develop a healthier relationship with their financial resources. Please welcome Jessie and Jacki.
Thank you, Tara. Yes, we'll share. Can you hear me? Oh. Hello.
Did I not hit it right?
We can just project it. We can talk loud.
Start sync.
Hello, it's me. No, still not.
I
Okay.
didn't hit the button right.
I don't. I
So
should put my
sorry.
glasses on.
I'm gonna jinx
We can talk
everything.
loud. Can you hear us or no?
It's for the recording.
I guess it's good.
Yeah.
Okay, Maddie.
Yes.
Hello, it's me. I'll do that again. I was listening to Adele this morning. Oh my gosh. Okay, we need a little energy in this space. Feel like I should crack a joke or something. I don't know. Woo! Okay, I know. We need those good tunes. Yeah. Okay, well, we'll end with this. Such a thrill for me to be here with all of you. That was a very long introduction, but very fun. And it's actually a thrill for me when Tara said that they invited Jesse to come to Utah. Is this your first time in Utah? No. Many times.
Utah. I come actually a couple times a year. I love Utah so much. It's one of my favorite places.
Oh, yay. Well, and we have spoken quite a few times, but we've never met in person. So this is really exciting for me to share a stage and a mic and time with all of you with Jacki Draper, because she is, when they say fierce, she's fierce. Like, we should have a, fierce women t-shirt out there too. So Jacki, let's just get into it, because I think we have about 40 minutes to talk. And we weren't scheduled for Q&A, but I feel like we could. What do you think? Tara,
100%.
can I have your nod on that? Okay.
Always.
Yay, thumbs up to that. So we really want to have a meaningful conversation. You have a leading venture capitalist here sitting with you, so I don't want to hog her time. But I do want to get it started in a little sort of structured conversation. And I was telling Jesse, as I was present this morning, what an amazing group of women entrepreneurs that presented today, and hoping later on today we'll find time to carve out to the side to meet Jesse if you haven't met her already. So I want to start a little bit, because it's called The Power of Her, just so you know, like this session. So let's start a little bit about, just before we jump into your halogen and how you got going in venture capital, a little bit more about you and your background, because you come from media. I love movies. Sundance was like in that, the Valley Girl thing. I got to ask you about that, because that's just so cool and interesting. But tell us a little bit about your background, kind of what brought you to this space, but just anchor us a little bit in your personal history.
Well, it all kind of goes together. So first of all, thank you all for having me, and thank you, Jacki. I'm so grateful to be on the stage with you. And truly, she has not stopped raving about the entrepreneurs she saw earlier, so I'd love to meet every single one of you. If any are in the room, raise your hand. Okay, good. Got to meet you. Okay, right here? Okay. So I'm Jacki Draper. I run Halogen Ventures. We invest in early stage female-founded consumer tech. As Jacki kindly mentioned, I was not always in this industry. I actually have a weird, wild, and crazy background, because I grew up in Silicon Valley before it was like Hollywoodized. I still don't understand why everyone thinks it's so fabulous. It's a very sleepy, quiet town, and it was fun to grow up in, but not as Hollywoodized as it really is. I am a fourth generation venture capitalist, and I used to shy away from sharing that, but it's a really important piece of my story. Because I was female, I didn't think I could go into this industry at all, even though all I knew growing up was startup companies and investors, and I would intern at them, and really all I knew about was technology entrepreneurs. And so as a little girl, they say you can be what you can see. And my aunt was an actress. Her name's Polly Draper. She was on a show called 30 Something and had some success in the sort of 80s, 90s. And I was like, oh, that's what women do. And so I was like, I'm going to Hollywood. Like, I'm going to be an actress. This is great. Went to UCLA's School of Theater, Film, and Television. And I had some success, was on a Nickelodeon show, did a bunch of movies. And I quickly realized there was actually one sort of cattle call audition, I would say, that really turned my head around, where, this is before the most recent female empowerment movement. As I'm sure many of you remember, women were just not taken as seriously, and still we're working on it, we're getting there. But I went to this cattle call. There's 500 women in the room, many much more beautiful, much more talented, and I waited 5 hours to go audition for Transporter 3 or something, Transporter 2, that guy, I don't even know. He can remain nameless, the main guy in that movie. But I walked in, finally, I had my little script prepared, and I was like, hi, I'm Jesse. And they're like, Yeah, no, don't speak. Turn around, click, turn around, click. Okay, thank you, goodbye. And I walked out of there and I was just like, ugh, that felt terrible. And I realized my agent had sent me on this audition through this organization called Charlie's Bodies. So they were literally casting just like bodies, and it made me feel so sick. And because I was on a Nickelodeon show, I was like a Z-list celebrity, and I was invited to one of the first Twitter conferences that same week. And it was 2008, something like that, at the Skirball Center in Los Angeles. So I went there, and I just felt I was one of the only women in the room. Tony Robbins spoke. It was a really interesting conference, and I was like an early Twitterer or whatever. And I remember thinking, this is really cool, and I feel oddly comfortable with all of these men in hoodies, if I'm being honest. And I just thought there was something there. So it was my last season of the Nickelodeon show. So instead of auditioning that hiatus, I decided to start one of the first tech talk shows. So this is back in 2008, 2009. I moved home to Silicon Valley and I worked out of my parents' garage, and I interviewed anyone I could find in technology in my parents' garage. And it was those early days of the blogosphere, if you will. We were one of the first video content companies to partner with Forbes.com and Mashable and all these tech news sites. And before Elon Musk was on the cover of magazines, and Eric Schmidt, the former CEO of Google, was just so, hard to get a hold of, they were on my talk show. And I know that it was one of the first tech talk shows, because nobody cared that I had these incredible entrepreneurs. Now I think Elon and I both wish this interview would die, because it's like one of those things that just pops up still on the internet, and you're like, please just go away, because I wore all pink. It was very silly. But then I made this initiative to interview 50% women in tech, because after 2 seasons of the show, I realized I'd only interviewed incredible men in technology. And this is not a man-hating club. We need everybody. I have 3 sons. I was raised by an incredible dad. I have 2 brothers. But I did not see women in tech. So I made this initiative, and they came. And it was like Sheryl Sandberg and Jessica Alba when she started Honest Company, and Jen Hyman from Rent the Runway, and Alexa Von Tobel from LearnVest, who Jacki, I don't know if you've told this story, but she seeded and walked away with a big chunk of change. And she sold it for 250 million, I think. 350 million. And Jacki was one of her first investors. But I had these incredible women on, and they would pitch me, and sometimes I'd say, you're too early for the show, love what you're doing. And I ended up writing some small checks at that time, created a nice little track record, and then realized women needed 2 things. One, media exposure. Women in tech needed media exposure, and I was doing that. The other thing they needed was funding. And so I didn't have very much money to fund these companies, but I had created this nice little sort of blood, sweat, and tears track record. And I used that then to raise my first fund by pitching actually a lot of the guests from my show. And now we're going into Fund 3. We've raised half of it, and we have 72 portfolio companies, 100% female founded, and we've had about 12 exits to date.
Love that. Well, and I didn't have this question, but I'm gonna ask it anyway, because you said that you didn't see, despite growing up in a family of venture capitalists.
Wait, first I think you should brag about the LearnVest.
Oh, okay. Well, I am, because I think that's, so, well, let me tell that story. Alexa Von Tobel dropped out of Harvard to start a company, I think it was 13 years ago, called LearnVest, which is based on Learn, Earn, Invest, which she, amazing story. She's written a couple books. I highly recommend her books, but she had this idea really around financial education, early fintech, which she ended up selling to Northwest Mutual for north of 300 million. So we were her first investors, a group of 3 women. So that showed me very early. It was only my 3rd, I guess, early stage investment, which is a good and a bad thing. You're like, wow, that can really, and it works. It really works. I mean, yes, please, more of that. But it's also super hard. But what's so cool, she went on to found Inspired Capital, for any of you that are fintech, which is the largest ever first-time fund. She partnered with Penny Pritzker. She herself is on Fund 2, which was 250 million. of a fund. And now she's sort of seeding the next generation, not only in fintech, but more broadly. And she's an incredible, incredible person. Also, I think mother of 3 or 4 children. So I want to ask you before we jump into the fund, because you said it, like, you did not see yourself going into venture despite having a family about it. And I'm curious, now that you are a venture capitalist, you are owning the story of being 4th generation, how you look back on that now, and whether just with like how you perceive that, and are you curious about why you didn't see yourself and how you've unpacked that a little bit?
Yeah. Wow, I love that question. And I haven't, I mean, I don't even know how I would articulate this because there's so many different angles to that question for me. But I mean, I am the first woman, and so I'm the oldest. And so I think as the oldest of 4, um, I felt like I was being trained to be a venture capitalist, if I'm being honest, until my brothers were born. And I'm very close with my brothers. We actually all run separate venture capital funds. But I think that there was something about that that was like, okay, well, maybe this isn't what I'm supposed to do. But then, so I like thought I was my dad and like could be my dad until that happened. And then I was like, oh, it's supposed to be men, like men pass this down. But it's like the problem generationally for women, which is, men have passed the pocketbooks down from generation to generation. And for all the incredible men in this room, I would just say, make sure you're pulling your daughters into the room, make sure you're pulling your sisters and your mothers into the room, make sure that everyone has a financial seat at the table. But we were also taught not to, I think women were taught on my mom's side not to speak about money. And so that was something that I still am challenging today, where I am like, share numbers. It's important to talk about how much things cost. It's not taboo. You're only going to learn if you start using actual numbers. How much have you fundraised? How much did you sell that company for? What does that cost? And so I feel like those are barriers I'm challenging. And my dad's been incredibly supportive of women and has funded some incredible women who've been very successful. And so he always made me feel like I could do anything. But I think when I unpack that, I did have to physically move from Silicon Valley. I'm based in LA. I've been there for 20 years and kind of created a different ecosystem that plugs into a lot more women entrepreneurs. I'm in consumer, and kind of I had to like build my own kind of world there. Yeah.
Well, and I want to come back. Seth is in the room, who's working with Connect Capital, and we were having a great discussion yesterday about how to build a vibrant ecosystem for entrepreneurship, and especially an inclusive approach to entrepreneurship. So I want to come back to that. So I'm noting it for both of us. But talk a little bit about, you said earlier about starting your fund, but how you just narrowed in on a thesis, and now you're on Fund 3. So some of your learnings along the way, and whether your thesis evolved or how you've sort of gone to first to second to third funds.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, Fund 1, I was investing in a female in the founding team of 5 in consumer technology. That was what I knew. I understood media, and I understood that media was a way to get products out there. And so I knew I could add value that way. Over time, I think every good VC looks 10 to 20 years out, and things inevitably change. And across our last 2 funds, we actually realized that a huge underfunded opportunity that could maximize returns in a really interesting way was childcare. And so we actually extracted a lot of the companies within our portfolio and kind of looked at how they had done over the last few years. And this is like WeCare that has, they actually just rebranded today, so I need to use their new name, Upwards. Sorry, I haven't done that yet. Upwards, they have 66,000 in-home vetted childcare locations across the country, and it's the most affordable option for childcare we've found. We have Binti, that is adoption technology that sells into social services across the country, and placed 100,000 children last year in homes, which was 60% more than social services had placed in the past, because they'd done it by hand, and the founder would literally be meeting with these social service agents in their car And because it's like their office, and they'd have post-it notes on the dashboard that said family of 5 looking for toddler, because everything was done by hand, and every child looking for a home and every family looking for a child, was represented by one of these social service agents who had hundreds of cases and had to match those. And so Felicia from Binti now has 5 software products that she sells into social services, supporting families. And so we found these really interesting technologies kind of around childcare. So I went out with Fund 3. I've talked to Jacki about this. And I sort of said, this is going to be the childcare fund. This is very exciting. And I got a lot of pushback. People were like, is that a big enough opportunity? I was like, I don't know. It may come from acting, but I got so many no's as an actress that like that just doesn't even affect me anymore. And I was like, well, it's 520 billion, but you know what? Challenge accepted. And so we did this huge study, and we interviewed hundreds of families across the country, and we're trying to make this annual now. And we said, what are you looking for? What are your pain points? What are you willing to pay for? And we learned so many things. We also learned that Future of Families is a $7.5 trillion opportunity. So now I just pull up the study, and I'm like, well, let me tell you about the study. It is a very big opportunity. So we've homed in on this Future of Family. So that's supporting families at home, at work, the health of the family. So we do a lot of consumer healthcare. I heard there were some great pitches in that space today. And then we do also like the financial health of the family, a lot around financial literacy and fintech.
Well, and I love that. And as we've talked about, I've invested in a lot of female GPs, and the future of family childcare. I mean, I do think, I'm not trying to make a massive generalization, but I think there's a huge opportunity there, and women funds focused or have a perspective towards trends cannot help but look for women entrepreneurs. So I'm curious about your perspective, and stats, annoy me, and then on the one hand, and then they make me very curious on the other hand, because I have always held this dichotomy, which makes me wild, that women in the economy make 70% of consumer purchasing decisions. Increasingly, we are holding more just the power of the purse, but investment capital, and yet we hear the number, less than 2%, 3% of VC dollars goes to women entrepreneurs, less than 0.2% to women of color. And to me, that's just a huge thing that doesn't make sense. And I'm curious, especially given your history of being at the table, literally the dinner table of venture capital for so long. And I know that motivated your piece in part, because you see it as we're not talking about charity here. We're talking about capital going to businesses that not only can be profitable, as many as we heard about today, but are saving lives, helping improving people's lives, especially with something like a future family thesis. So how do you think about that, paradox? And how do you, as a venture capital, how are you seeing the future of that, and what needs to happen? And this is a big question, in that to help reconcile that, like more capital, of course, going to women entrepreneurs, but to back up the truck, how do you hold those two things as evidence as being true? And just how does that keep you awake at night? Because at 3 in the morning when I'm awake at night, I want to think, oh, damn, good, Jesse's awake at night too, thinking about this.
I'm definitely awake at night. Definitely awake at night, thinking about this specifically. But I actually would say you started this question by talking about data, and I actually think that is our superpower here. I think data is really, really important to this. You're mentioning that 70 to 80% of purchasing decisions are made by women. I think it's 80% of healthcare decisions are made by women for the family. And so those are real opportunities. And the fact that we haven't solved a lot more women's health issues and created more products focused towards women is mind-blowing, but it's also just the way society was set up previously, and it's changing. Like, I do see change. I think some of the places that it really does need to change now that we're on our third fund, that is very frustrating to me, is at the LP level. So like you look at Jacki, and she's an amazing example of someone who made an investment, made a bunch of capital, had some really significant returns, was able to invest that back into the ecosystem. Another example I would give is Cindy Eckert, who started the first sex drug for women, sold it to Valiant Pharmaceuticals for $1 billion. She's one of our LPs, and she's now investing that all into women. So we need more women starting companies, selling their companies for $1 billion, and that will go back into the ecosystem. But we also need at the LP level and the institutional level. So those are endowments, any kind of like school endowment or large family offices, even so far as to say like sovereign wealth funds and things like that. The majority of those are managed by advisors who typically are based in New England, on the East Coast, and they all funnel their capital, which is billions and trillions of capital in the world, to the same 5 VC funds in Silicon Valley. And it's still happening. And so what funds like mine are doing, and Alexa and some others, are we're trying to kind of like whittle away at that and get new, have these advisors who basically manage the capital, create new buckets for us. The issue is, I have met with many of these. They're called Mercer, Cambridge, and they're all wonderful people, work at these places. I think they are trying to change, but they all come to me and say, hey, you're perfect for our diversity bucket. And I'm like, okay, great. So tell me about the diversity bucket. Like, I'm looking to fundraise, so that sounds good to me. And they're like, oh, well, we haven't raised our diversity bucket yet. So I'm like, okay, I want to be in the big bucket. I don't want to be in the diversity bucket. Where's the big bucket? Does the big bucket have the money in it? And so that's kind of where it's really broken, is at the institutional LP level, and we need more funds to be able to break through that. And that's not just for women. It's for minority-led funds. It's for basically any emerging manager. It's difficult to break in, and I hear this talk in GPs, and we all deal with the same things as like emerging managers. And so those are things we're constantly looking to change.
Yeah. Well, and She Money's had a few sessions, and there's with managers, women of color like Tracy Gray I'm sure you know Tracy from the 22 Fund in LA, Gayla Jennings O'Burns from the Walkstar Women of Color Fund. And the barriers are, especially for first-time managers, to your point, there's processes that we have to challenge, because you talk about democratizing access to capital and opening up these buckets, and yet the processes, I just came back from Canada, that's my Canadian coming out. Like, you holes there, there's a bunch of hosers out there, keeping these processes, like, it's a problem. But there's so many of these processes that are just not fair or democratic. And to your point, they're in the way of what I think we all want to see, which is opportunity, where capital meets incredible, just opportunity. And there's so many barriers to that. So I'd love to push a little bit on a couple of your investment theses. Like women's health, to your point, is opened up because it wasn't that long ago that, people might not know this, but the doctors in the room will, that medical studies actually weren't even on women's bodies because we're too complicated, because we have cycles. So the vast majority of research for entire human history up until about 30 or 40 years ago was almost exclusively on male bodies. And as a woman whom we were talking about this, like, I want you to invest in some menopause companies, please. I mean, we were talking about Genevieve. But we're just studying women's bodies, women's health, and companies that are designed to care for women. Sort of female health tech is a big sector. But talk about a few of the other areas where you're looking forward, very excited about from an investment perspective.
Yeah, and we invest like in companies also that serve everyone, but I think women's health is an enormous opportunity. We actually have a couple companies. One is called, we're in Everlywell. Does anyone know Everlywell? It's one of the biggest at-home diagnostics tests. You can do an allergy test at home, Lyme disease test, thyroid, and they're doing really well. We're also in a company called Teal Health that's newer and one of the first at-home cervical cancer detectors. And we're really excited about that company. This will be one of the first times that you can do that fully at home. You won't have to go to your gyno to have that happen. And it's similar to like a tampon or something. And then another company we have is called Vivu, and this is not necessarily focused towards just women, but it is a stick you pee on that assesses your health in 12 categories, and you pee on it and it tells you, it gives you a ranking. My husband and I are very competitive with the ranking. And I like to do it when I'm feeling kind of like not great, because it'll be like, you're super dehydrated or your calcium's low. It actually flagged I had a calcium deficiency, which was very helpful. It told me I needed to eat more cabbage, which wasn't in my normal like rotation. But now if you need some great cabbage recipes, like I have them. But that's a really good one that we love. And then I think just women's health overall, yes, the data, like there isn't even enough research on women's hearts. You know, it's really fascinating, but I think that's a huge, massive opportunity, and we're looking very seriously there. We have a company called Flex that's an alternate tampon device. It's sort of like everything but tampons, but she created the first Flex disc, and they're in every major retailer now, Target, Walmart, Walgreens. You'll start to see them, but she did something different because there's a large community of women who got yeast infections from tampons. So she was never able to use tampons. So she created something that she could use. And you can pee with it in, you can have sex with it in. I'm so sorry. That's as girly as I'll get today. But it's a game changer for women. And they've sold over 100 million now of them, which is insane. She just presented at our annual meeting. So I'd say women's health and just healthcare in general, the way I look at it is post-COVID, in 10 to 20 years, the last resort will be going into the hospital. What are the diagnostic tests before? What are the telehealth opportunities? Who are the new insurance providers? And that's what we're very excited about.
Thank you. So there are a lot of entrepreneurs in this room, and we've had a few sessions today. The Pathways to Capital one, Kimmy did an amazing job, Kimmy, if you're still here, and Steph and others talking about finding the right kind of capital for your business. So let's make some assumptions that you're starting a business that has $1 billion potential. What advice, and I think the ones that we're presenting today are seeking equity financing. So lean into a little bit of advice for those entrepreneurs in the room from your experience in terms of navigating that process. I did it again, that process. And I have cabbage recipes, by the way, because I'm Ukrainian, so we're low on cabbage. So you can talk to me about that as well. But some advice for the entrepreneurs in the room that are on that path now, especially given the data we just saw about how challenging the market environment is.
Okay, Jacki, let me tell you about our processes. We have a lot of different processes at Halogen. The first process that I'm going to tell you about I would say like advice for entrepreneurs, if you're all getting started raising your first, say, million to get your company off the ground, I think something I see, and I look at women women founders for a living. So I actually collect data on behaviors of women versus the men who come in and pitch. And a lot of women they come in and they're thinking, okay, here's the product I'm building. It's this big. And I'm like, okay, cool. My business model only works if you make me $1 billion, because I have to return all of my investors' money. So when you go in to pitch those investors, know that that's what they're thinking. You need to have created $1 billion market opportunity, or you're creating a company that could potentially sell for $1 billion. Every company starts with one product, but build the vision for them too. What other products are in your roadmap? How do you make that $100 million opportunity into $1 billion opportunity? Can you also own the distribution of that product? What does that look like? So think as big as is humanly possible. The good news about that is women are much more realistic about what we need. And so, a dollar goes farther. There's all this great data and research. And as we were talking about data earlier, I now collect all of the research. When I raised Fund One, I mean, people were laughing me out of the room. They were literally like, "Wait, why would you? Why would you only invest in women?" And now it's so nice to be like, "Oh, hey, let me reference this study from like Goldman Sachs, Amex, BCG, like all of these incredible resources on why investing in diversity and inclusion is so incredibly important." And for women, a dollar goes farther. We're much more realistic about what we need. So you'll say, hey, I'm raising $1 million. That's all I need. But what I would advise is you also need a larger miscellaneous category, because it's not straight up the hill. It's going to be, you're going to weave around, the product's not going to work, it's going to work, and you need a bigger miscellaneous category. So you might be going out for $1 million, go out for 3. And hopefully you don't have to raise again. So think about that. It's better to set yourself up for success, especially right now. And then also just don't give up, like keep going. I have a lot of young female fund managers come to me now and say, how did you raise your first fund? And I'm like, you just have to get there. And they'll be like, oh, well, I'm trying to get to 10 million. I've only raised 500,000. I think I'm just gonna stop. And I'm like, you can't stop. First of all, you can't stop for your fund and your investors. You can't stop for women. You need to finish this thing. Like, you represent so many people right now. And you just get there and you grind it out. And every no, when you're fundraising, whether you're a founder or you're, a venture capitalist, you will get no's. Don't get discouraged by them. You should go and look, like, let them just roll off you, and know that it's usually nothing personal. It's usually like they have a specific bucket focused on consumer healthcare and you don't do consumer healthcare, or they actually, something that you should always ask investors is, sometimes they're fundraising. I try to be really upfront with founders, and I email them right back and say, hey, we're fundraising right now. We don't have capital to deploy right now. We're focused on that. We would love to talk to you in 3 months. But for some reason, a lot of investors don't say that up front. I think it's really, really important, and founders really appreciate that. And it's like, oh, I get it. Like, I'm raising money, they're raising money. I get it. So just grind it out, get out there. Don't take it personally when you get these no's, and plan on talking to 100 investors. You will find some yeses in there. And if by number 20 you haven't even found one, go back to a couple people that you had really great conversations with and say, hey, I need feedback. Like, what was your concern? And maybe it's something so simple that you can throw a new slide together in your deck that addresses that, so it's no longer an issue. So those would be my kind of 3 pieces of advice.
Great, thank you. Well, I have so many more questions, but I want to get prepared. I'll ask one more, and if y'all want to put your hands up if you want to ask questions. So many. I was driving in LA not that long ago, and I saw a billboard, right? This is what Tara mentioned, that you took out, that Halogen took out, where the hashtag was Invest in Women, and you featured some women founders. So tell us a little bit about that campaign, because I'm like, heck yes. How many Utah founders would like their face on a billboard? Okay, I'm seeing some hands up here. But talk about what motivated that, and what feedback you received around that, and is there an eye towards making this a campaign in other cities?
Thank you for asking about that. So, just to bring it back to I wrote this article a couple of years ago called Investing in Women Isn't a Fucking Charity, and I'm so sorry that I used the bad word, but it was during COVID, and it was out of a moment of huge frustration for me, where everyone was sort of saying, oh, you're investing in women, it's like charity. And I'm like, no, this is a returns focused fund. We're going to make a lot of money. And I just kept being put in this charity bucket. And I was like, just because I'm a woman, I'm being put in this bucket? I don't understand. The male VCs aren't being put in this bucket. And so I wrote this article and backed it up with data. And it was the start of what I'm doing personally and professionally to change the trajectory for women. And what I challenge all of you to do, male or female, is like, figure out what you're doing and what you can do to change the trajectory for women. It's now been a couple years, and we wanted to do something to build upon that campaign, or the article, which turned into this crazy thing where we got 1 million impressions in a couple weeks, and I just didn't anticipate it. You know, you like write all these articles and no one cares, and then like you're like, whoa, what just happened? But people were frustrated, and it really hit a pain point during a time when a lot of women just felt what I was feeling. And so I think more recently we did this big campaign. We were trying something new where I felt like a lot of people were starting to see women be successful in these sort of fashion and beauty businesses. There were a couple things that went into this. And I wanted to highlight that women are starting change-making businesses in every industry. And so we chose to start 5 of our founders. One who has a waste management technology, one, Sally Krawcheck, who runs Elvest, that's a financial management platform for women. They manage now $1.6 billion, and they're the first financial management platform that takes childcare into account. It's a great product. Feel free to try it out. And then we, you know, some of our childcare businesses, and we just tried to highlight these unique founders, and then we tried to sort of stage it like a political campaign. So we said, do you want change? And then we put all of these incredible faces up there, and so that people would go kind of research and learn about these different founders, and it sparked great conversation online. We got actually the billboard, everyone loved the billboard, but we actually did this whole digital campaign that got like, you know, 5 million impressions in a month. And actually, the billboard is still up, and we're not paying for it, which I'm really happy about. They just haven't changed it. So it's been like 4 months in Los Angeles, and people are still sending me pictures of it. You know, we had to be very scrappy, so we got a billboard as close to Beverly Hills as we possibly could, but not quite in Beverly Hills. But it's still there. So we were looking at that as a new way to push the conversation forward. So I'd say, you know, Jacki, you do so much with She Money, and you should all be members and join the platform and everything. But I think there's so much more each of you individually can do, whether it's, you know, championing women in the room. If you're a male in this room on a board, you know, pull a female in there, make sure that there's women on all of your boards. If you're a woman, speak up. You can actually promote yourself. I think it's really important that women promote themselves. It was part of the issue I saw growing up, was there weren't enough media in tech, or women in tech in the media. And so I think that's kind of where it came from, but we're constantly, it's one of our pieces of trying to change the trajectory.
So questions. Does anyone have a question? Krista?
I think that's so important and such an incredible question. And I know Jacki also does quite a bit of mentoring. I try to mentor as much as I can. I try to take 15 minutes with like any woman I possibly can. You know, for me personally, I sit on the board of an organization called Project Glimmer, where we mentor women who are in the foster care system. And I think that's incredibly important, something I'm very focused on, both as a fund and as and personally, is solving the foster care system with technology, with getting, it's a totally solvable problem. Like, we need to get these kids in homes, but they need mentorship. This gets, you know, if we solve the foster care system, which is just a broken system that the government put together, we get 50% of the homeless off of the street. 70 to 80% of the incarcerated today went through our foster care system. And so I think that's a really, really important, if you want to focus your energy, get involved with an organization that works with the foster care system where you can mentor them. But I think also just gathering, and then also getting in with like young minds, like going and creating seminars for high school students, and you know, teaching entrepreneurship earlier. I think a lot of that, those are all things all of the people in this room can do.
Thanks. And I'll say something, and I'm not going to get this right, but we came up with this framework beyond mentorship, kind of called Sistering Up. People don't know the term sistering. I want to add it to your dictionary and vocabulary right now because sistering is a construction term that is meant to make stronger. It's when they put two adjacent materials together to build it. And we use the sistering term, and we created a framework around that we use, which is multifaceted from, just connecting to amplifying to championing to partnering. And I think this is what we're trying to say is be more intentional. We can't all do everything for everyone. That's just impossible. But if you give yourself sort of saying, this is what I can do now and be intentional, and sponsoring to me is even, I'm not that mentoring isn't important, but sponsoring is so important. There was a woman, Sylvia Ann Hewlett, I don't know if you remember, she was a pioneer in work life and diversity. She wrote a book called Creating a Life, Professional Women in the Quest for Children, one of my favorite books ever. And then she went on to write, Forget a Mentor, Find a Sponsor. And I think we can't sponsor everyone either, but when you do, lean in hard, like I'm doing for Noella Sudbury, who's in the room right now. Where is she? And her company, Rasa, because I believe in her wholeheartedly. Every ounce of my being knows that she's going to be successful and she's changing lives. So I just invite us all to consider, who are we sponsoring? Who can we can't lean in for everyone, but we can lean in for someone, and vice versa. We can ask someone to lean in hard for us. One more question, maybe, Tara, time for? No time? No, it's okay. So Jesse's going to be around, I think, for the afternoon. Can we all just thank Jesse for coming all the way to Los Angeles? Yes, thank you so much.